Good morning, everyone. We're continuing here in the Mesillas Yesharim, and along the lines that we mentioned yesterday about how a person should conduct themselves with anivus, with humility. And he tells over a whimsical story from the Gemara, the following: V'sipru mi gaidel anvasai shel Bava ben Buta. The Gemara tells us over the story of the tremendous humility of one of the great sages whose name was Bava ben Buta. That was his name. And it's important to remember his name, as we will see in the story. Yesharim, the Gemara says over the following story: Ahu bar Bavel, the sleek Eretz Yisrael. There was a man from Bavel, from Babylonia, who came to Eretz Yisrael, and he married a woman in Eretz Yisrael. So you have a Babylonian marrying an Israeli, basically, and they spoke different dialects. Their languages was different. He spoke Aramaic, she spoke Ivrit, Hebrew. They didn't. The language was not the same. You can only imagine their background was not the same. They grew up in different homes and the like. Whatever. It's a long shmooze for Shalom Bayis over here from this Gemara, but we're going to pull out what the Ramchal wants us to learn. And it says like this: Amale bishilili. He said to her, "Please cook for me some lentils." She didn't understand what lentils were. She cooked for him another food. He asked her for something else, and she didn't understand what that word meant, and she ended up cooking him something different. Whatever he asked her for, whatever word he said, in her language, in her dialect, it meant something else. And every time that he asked for something, she always in return gave him something that was different and not what he had requested of her. So you can imagine the tensions of Shalom Bayis that were going on in this house. You have a wife who seems to never respect her husband's wishes. He asks for innocent, simple things, just a glass of water, and he gets a bowl of stew. He asks for lentil beans, and he gets a pot of gourds, all different things, whatever he might have asked for. So things were not going so well for the two of them. It continued like this for quite some time. Zili tivra yasain al reshe de bava. He once asked her for the following. He asked her for bava, which were 2 lamps. He asked her for 2 melons, which in the way that he asked for them in his language meant was melons, but in her language it meant lamps. So he asked for 2 boitzini. He asked for 2 melons, which she thought meant 2 lamps. So he got so frustrated, he wanted to eat something, and she ends up bringing him 2 lamps. So he says the following: Zile tivri yasai na reshe de bava. Go and break those lamps on the bava, which is on the top, the reshe de bava, on the top of the doorway. Now remember, bava means the doorway, but it's also the name of Bava ben Buta. So what happened? Have Yisave Bava ben Buta v'doin dina. Bava ben Buta, the great sage of the Jewish people, was sitting in a court of law and he was trying a case. Azalis usvarach yashain al reshe. So she came along, and instead of breaking the lamps on the top of the bava, the doorway, she went to the head of Bava ben Buta and she smashed the lamps on his head. Amalei, so Bava looked surprisingly at this woman and he said, Ma'adein da'avat, what did you do over here? You just broke lamps on my head. Amalei kach sivani ba'ali. She said, well, that's what my husband told me to do. Omar, so Bava ben Buta chapped, he understood what was going on over here, and he said, Asis v'tzayim ba'alech, you did the will of your husband. Hamakayim yoitzi mimeich shnei banim kebava ben Buta me'akadosh baruch hu, bring forth from you 2 sons that are going to be like Bava ben Buta, whose head you just broke the lamps on. And therefore, says the Ramchal over here, do you see what humility is? Bava ben Buta, he's sitting in his court of law. He's surrounded by his other dayanim, the other judges. There's plaintiffs over there. There are defendants. There's the other lawyers. Everybody's around. And this woman, haphazard woman, who's trying to do the will of her husband, comes running in and she smashes 2 lamps on his head to the embarrassment and shame of himself in front of everyone that is there. And he doesn't overreact. He doesn't say, hey, lady, what are you doing? He calmly asks her, why did you do that? And she explains to him, well, that's what my husband said. And in an instant, he takes the whole thing into perspective and he probably realized everything, that she comes from Eretz Yisrael and her husband comes from Bavel. And he knew that the words that the husband asked for as a melon is what she understands as lamps. And he must have told his wife to go smash them on the head of the doorway. And she, being quite foolish over here, thought that her husband said, go smash it on the head of Bava ben Buta. And she did the Ritzayin Baila, she did what her husband wanted. Said Bava ben Buta, what a tzadekis you are. You deserve to have children like Bava ben Buta come from you. That's humility, says the Gemara, when a person doesn't care about their own honor and their own glory and their own respect and their own reputation, even in their own bezdin, where everybody's sitting around watching what's going on. They control themselves, they hold themselves back from the kas, from the anger, all the different things they could have done. And in great humility, instead of reacting in such a negative way to this woman, he's makabel, he accepts it all, and he leaves it with a bracha that we assume came true, that she had two great sons, no less than Bava ben Buta. This is the ways of a Yid, of a Jew. This is the ways of humility, where a person stops thinking so much about themselves, their own selfish honor and their covet and their reputation, but rather I deal with each person accordingly. I pause, I think, I stop before I overreact to the situation, and in that way we can go down in history as being the Bava ben Butas of our generation. Be'ezus Hashem. Have a wonderful day, a wonderful Shabbos. We look forward to learning with you next week. Be'ezus Hashem.